Old houses hold within them many memories of people who lived in them for many years, and then left them and departed to their graves, leaving behind them a complete silence after their conversations and laughter used to fill the horizon. But sometimes, and in rare cases, the walls of those old houses contain more than memories, things that sometimes appear as muffled voices and silent footsteps whose source no one knows, and sometimes they appear in the form of pale, frightening faces, appearing from another world to arouse indescribable terror and panic in the souls of the living. Some call them ghosts, and link them to the spirits of the dead, claiming that they remain, for an unknown reason, in the spot where they died. The house we will write about today is one of those terrifying spots most crowded with ghosts. It has even deserved the title of the most famous haunted house in America. Ghosts! Are you kidding? Frances laughed at the story the old man who ran the house had told her, then added in a tone tinged with defiance, "There is no such thing as ghosts, sir. These are just superstitions, and to prove it to you, I will spend the night here tonight. Please book me a room and we will see who will scare the other, me or your old worn-out ghosts." The old man did not argue with her. He wrote her name in his notebook, then handed her the keys to her room and wished her good night. The old man was a dignified, respectful man who spoke with great politeness and courtesy, but Frances was disturbed by the wicked smile that never left his lips and the mocking look that was shining in his eyes. What kind of madman would believe in ghost nonsense? Frances muttered to herself as she struggled to sleep on the soft bed in the middle of the small room she had rented that night. Only a few moments passed before her heavy, tired eyelids gave in and she fell into a deep sleep. When Frances opened her eyes again, she did not know what time it was. Was it dawn? There was a dim yellow light dancing on the wall. She felt a strange gloom taking over her feelings. The air in the room became uncomfortably heavy, and she felt as if something was sitting on her chest. She slowly turned her body towards the other side of the bed, but suddenly froze and was overcome with fear. There was a black woman standing at the edge of the bed staring at her. She held a candle in her hand and wore a green bonnet on her head. Her clothes were strange and old-fashioned. Frances screamed and buried her head under the blanket. Then moments passed in a strange silence and stillness. Perhaps it is a trick or a bad joke played by that old man, thought Frances to herself, as she slowly stuck her head out from under the covers. The black woman was still standing there like a statue, so real that the flame of her candle was dancing and giving off a thin wisp of smoke. Frances took heart and slowly stretched out her hand towards the woman, but her trembling fingers had barely reached her before she disappeared and vanished like smoke. The next morning, Mrs. Frances Myers not only believed in ghosts, but she would later write a book about her personal experience with the ghosts of the Ace House one, an experience that later prompted her to dig up the history of the house and then buy it, becoming one of the many names that owned it for 2 centuries, Ghost Maid Chloe. In the early 19th century, slavery was a major part of American life, especially in the South, where there were vast cotton plantations. The Myrtles plantation, like other plantations, owned hundreds of slaves. They lived a miserable life, working all day in the fields and spending their nights in wretched, miserable huts that were not even suitable as pens for animals. However, what alleviated their misery a little was the kindness of the landowner, Mrs. Elizabeth Potter, who inherited the plantation and its contents from her husband and managed it well for many years. Years passed, and Mrs. Potter grew old and could no longer watch the slaves and continue working in the fields. And because none of her 4 sons who lived in the city wanted to manage the farm, the old woman was forced to entrust this task to Clark Woodruff, the husband of her daughter Sarah, who lived with her in the house along with her 2 daughters, Carolyn and Mary. Woodruff was an opportunist who was known for his bad manners. He treated the slaves harshly and was known for taking mistresses from the Negro women who worked for him. He had his own ways of seducing, enticing, and forcing them. The servant, Chloe, was one of those mistresses. Woodruff threatened to send her back to hard work in the fields if she did not respond to his animal whims, so she obeyed him and carried out all his desires. But he gradually grew tired of her and left her and took another mistress. Chloe had been living in constant fear ever since Woodruff had abandoned her and stopped caring about her. She was afraid that she would be sent back to work in the fields. It was like being cast out of heaven and thrown into hell. So Chloe began to eavesdrop on Woodruff's conversations with his wife and mother-in-law to see if they mentioned her name or anything about sending her back to work in the fields. Unfortunately for poor Chloe, Woodruff caught her in the act of eavesdropping on the family's conversations. He decided to punish her as an example to others. He dragged her in front of the rest of the maids, then took out a knife and cut off her ear. Since then, poor Chloe has been wearing a green bonnet to cover the disfigurement of her severed ear. What happened next? Here the story differs, but the result is the same, as there is a team that claims that Chloe wanted to regain the family's trust again. So she put a quantity of poison in a cake that Mrs. Woodruff asked her to make to celebrate her daughter Caroline's birthday. The naive Chloe believed that the poison would only make the family sick, so that she would visit them and gain their trust and love again. There is a second team that claims that Chloe put the poison in the cake in order to take revenge on Woodruff. But in general, whatever the reason that prompted Chloe to poison the cake, the result was tragic and sad in every sense of the word, as Woodruff himself did not eat from the cake, but his pregnant wife and 2 daughters did, and soon showed symptoms of poisoning and died on the same day. Clark Woodruff's anger and grief were indescribable, and some of the slaves, fearing his vengeance, went to the cabin where Chloe was hiding, dragged her to the myrtle house, put a rope around her neck, and hanged her from the branches of a tree opposite the house. Then they lowered her body, cut it into small pieces, crushed it with stones, and threw it into the waters of the Mississippi River next to the plantation. That night was the bloodiest and most terrifying in the history of the farm. The smell of blood and death mixed with Woodruff's angry and insane screams. And when dawn broke, Woodruff took one last look at the dining room where his wife and 2 daughters had died. Then he locked the door tightly and prevented anyone from entering it until the last day of his life. And today visitors call that room the playroom, as some claim that the sounds of children playing and laughing come from it on some nights. But when the room is checked, it is always found empty. Also, some passers-by in front of the house sometimes see on moonlit nights the ghost of a little girl jumping and laughing at the playroom window, and many people believe that these sounds and ghosts belong to the innocent Woodruff girls who lost their lives on the day of the accident. The most famous ghost in the house is the ghost of the black lady with the green hood, who many people believe is the ghost of Chloe. She is said to wander around the house at night holding a candle and accompanied by the faint sound of small children crying and wailing. One of the owners of the house was able to take an alleged photo of the ghost, and this photo is sold today as a souvenir for visitors eager to hear ghost stories. A number of those who spent the night in the house also claimed that they woke up late at night to see a black woman holding a candle and standing at the edge of their beds, staring at them strangely. More ghosts. Perhaps the most famous feature of the Myrtle Plantation is its many ghosts, a feature that has earned it the title of America's most haunted house. It is said that the house is cursed because it was built on an ancient Indian burial ground, and that among the house's many ghosts is the ghost of an Indian woman. Another opinion holds that the house's many ghosts are linked to its bloody history, with supporters of this opinion claiming that 11 murders have taken place inside it. Among these crimes was the murder of Louis Sterling after he was stabbed several times inside the house. Louis was the son of one of the plantation's owners during the 19th century. There are also 3 federal soldiers who hid and were killed inside the house during one of the battles of the American Civil War, and it is said that a large blood stain in the shape of a human covered the floor of the room in which one of these soldiers was killed, and all attempts to remove it were unsuccessful until it disappeared on its own several years later. In the 1920s, police found the body of one of the Williams family members who owned the house at the time, murdered. It seems that he lost his life at the hands of some thieves who tried to steal the farm. William Winter is the most famous of those killed in the house. He was a lawyer and the son-in-law of Mrs. Mary Cobb, the owner of the plantation. He lived with her in the Ace house along with his wife and children. One night in 1871, an unknown person called him outside to talk to him. As soon as Winter left the house, he was shot dead, but he did not die immediately. Instead, he crawled back into the house despite his wounds and continued crawling towards the stairs leading to the second floor. He was trying to climb to die in the arms of his beloved wife, who was sleeping with the children in one of the rooms. However, The poor man lost his strength and breathed his last on the 17th step of the stairs. It is said that William Winter's ghost still tries to climb to the second floor to this day, but he fails every time. His footsteps can still be heard on some nights as he climbs the stairs towards the top, but they always stop and disappear at the 17th step and do not go beyond it, exactly as happened to him during his death. There are other oddities in the Ace house, one of which is an old mirror that is said to have trapped the spirits of those who breathed their last inside the house, which is why traces of unknown handprints appear on it, as if someone is trying to break it and get out of it. One of the owners of the house, who used to make fun of ghost stories, tried to remove these fingerprints by replacing the mirror glass, but he was astonished after several days when the fingerprints reappeared on the new glass. Another oddity of this mirror is the appearance of the ghost of a girl descending the stairs while singing and dancing, then stopping in front of the mirror, her features changing to fear and anger, and she begins to look around inside the mirror as if she is searching for something lost. It is said that this ghost is of a girl who was murdered inside the house for an unknown reason while she was standing in front of the mirror, and because she could not see the face of her killer, her angry ghost looks around the mirror, hoping to catch a glimpse of the killer's face, so her tormented soul can rest. Another puzzling mystery is a piano placed in one of the rooms. Some of those who spent the night in the house claimed that they heard its sound playing all night long. The strange thing is that the unknown player only knows one piece and keeps repeating it over and over again. The playing would stop if someone entered the room to check the source of the sound. Of course, he would find it empty and see the piano keyboard closed, but as soon as he left the room, the sound of playing would return again.